We are live. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Forever Rugby on Forever Sports. It is a Wednesday afternoon. It is about 24 hours since Rusty Erasmus has named his side to take on Australia. We will get the Australian side. That'll be announced tomorrow. So then we'll know a bit more about how they're going to line up. For example, they are quite injury hit at the moment, are the Australians. So very interesting to see the side that Joe Schmidt does name. And today we're going to be talking about quite a few things. We'll be looking at some of the latest rugby news. So, for example, the move by Siya Kolisi to the Sharks. We've been talking a little bit about Rassie Erasmus and the plans for the bomb squad, for example, that he spoke about yesterday in terms of his selections and a very different looking bomb squad as well. And we've been talking a little bit about the fly half situation as well. Within the Springboks, with looking very, very healthy for a change, and a player who was so important to the Boks last year. Now, a lot of people saying that this might be the end of the road, and that is MANIE. We're going to be talking a little bit about his future, his chances of being able to get that Springbok jersey back, being able to be in the mix, and be able to continue being a regular in the Springbok side with the rise of Sasha Ngomazulu, who will get his first start for the Springboks this weekend. A very interesting selection, for example. And one that sort of shows you that very much Project 2027 is very much on. But even Project Now, I think it's, the way he's playing at the moment, if he plays well this weekend, I think he'll continue to be backed. And so we might even be sort of seeing a sort of change in the guard as we go in terms of our sort of strongest teams. I do think when it comes to, for example, playing New Zealand at the end of the month, we'll probably go back to Andre Pollard. You kind of go back to that tried and tested, Mr. Reliable type of situation. But Sasha Ngomazulu might have one, maybe even two games in the next 2 weeks to really sort of put a cat amongst the pigeons, so to speak, with regards to putting pressure on Andre Pollard, who has played, I think, 71 tests and started all but about 17 of them. So that's a very interesting dynamic. Let's get into it, shall we? We'll start with the Rassie Erasmus press conference yesterday. Very interesting. For example, confirming that there are talks to bring Siya Kolisi back to the Sharks, and that's an interesting one. First of all, the fact that he himself revealed it, which I'm pretty sure he wasn't supposed to do. They're in the middle of kind of pretty hectic negotiations about the possibility of him coming back, and I'm pretty sure that there would have been plans for big announcements, the way to sort of reveal and stuff like that. So for Rassie Erasmus to come out and say, yeah, no, the conversations are happening, is probably not exactly what Rassie nor the Sharks had in mind, but he did do that. So he has confirmed that there are discussions to bring Siya Kolisi back to South Africa. SA Rugby have been asked about it, and they have said they want him to they want him to come back, and they'd love to have him back. What we don't know quite yet is the logistics, in terms of the finances, who's paying what, for example, what is going to be the sort of the numbers with regards to a buyback fee or sort of a buyout clause in terms of buying him out of the contract, who's going to sort of foot the bill over there. In terms of salary, for example, are SRB going to contribute more to him as a player of national interest, known as sort of a pony player? So there's lots to still get done with regards to that Siya Kolisi move. But Rassie Erasmus did confirm that the conversations are very much underway for that. Now, it's been an interesting reaction. I think a lot of Sharks fans very much want to see him back, but are concerned about the numbers needed to make it happen. And I think that's a very fair sort of position to have. He's a wonderful player. He's a wonderful ambassador for the game. And if there's one player that deserves to sort of be where he's appreciated and be where he's happiest, for example, it is Siya Kolisi, who's given so much to the Springbok brand, the Springbok name, for example, and has had such a good career. However, you've also got to look at the facts and the reality of the situation. And the reality of the situation is that he's not particularly young. He's coming to the sort of last stage of his career. So he's just turned 33 years old. So he's not old, for example, not retiring anytime soon. He's got another 2-3 years left in him. But is it the right move financially to spend what could be, 17, 18 million rand before salary to bring him back, where you could be investing that money elsewhere? For example, if it's SA Rugby point of view, I don't want to see SA Rugby investing that kind of money in bringing back a player for a union. I'd rather see them investing that kind of money into the sevens setup, into the women's rugby setup, for example, into the junior box setup. into junior rugby in general. I think that's where money can be better spent. 70 million rand can go a long way in the sort of the seven setup. That can be contracting players, for example. That can be paying for the women's side to be playing a bit more on the circuit, so they're sort of more regulars and getting that sort of exposure a bit more. So, it's quite a complicated situation, and we'll have to wait and see exactly how that sort of unfolds. If the Sharks want to put up the money, then, why not? It's their money at the end of the day. They can do with what they want. What's very interesting, though, is that apparently it might come at a cost of Vincent Tuka, with a lot of top 14 clubs circling for the Sharks loose forward, who has had a slow start to his Sharks career, had a lot of injuries. He's just been joined by his younger brother, MANIE, an absolute storm of a season at the Lions last season. Vince Tuka is currently 25 years old, still not South African qualified, as far as we understand. They're trying to get the process done, but still at this stage does not have the South African citizenship, so make him eligible to play for the Springboks. It would not be a fun player to lose if we suddenly see him playing for France in a few years' time, for example. He'd have to go over there and qualify and stuff like that. But apparently the likes of Toulon, La Rochelle, Pau, Montpellier, and Toulouse are all quite keen on Vince Tuka. And I'm not surprised. You watch the way he plays, and he's an absolute unit of a man. Got a very good skill set as well, and I think he'll thrive in the likes of a top 14. So that could be one of the downsides. Obviously, at least you're coming back. You're bringing back a 33-year-old at the cost of a 25-year-old. Who could have played for another sort of 4 or 5 years for the Sharks. So it's an interesting one. I mean, in theory, I think Vince Tuka would have signed a long-term contract, so there could have been a buyout fee for him. So that could help sort of fund the Siya move. But again, do you want to be selling a young prospect to bring back an older player? Which, from a depth point of view, the Sharks will always want more depth there, but they've got lots and lots of players, especially loose forwards. If you look at that Sharks squad, and you've got, they've had to try and sort of. They haven't even been able to fit in the likes of, Dylan Richardson hasn't played as much as he probably would have thought he would in the last few years. Somebody like Peter Gamedi was sort of surplus to requirements. They've got lots of options, so they've got the likes of a Vince Tuka now, a Emmanuel Stuka, George Cornier. You've got a James Venter, you've got a Jean Labuskakny, you've got a Dylan Richardson. There's also something like Tina Masaveri been playing a bit more. So there's a Principal Lazy, obviously. So they've got so many options at loose forward, which is why we see Vince Tuka, for example, also cover lock. But they're also bringing in a lot of players like that. So it's a very interesting signing and situation. I think, to be perfectly honest, I don't think they massively need Siya. I don't think the money really makes sense. But yeah, at the end of the day, if that's what they decide, that's what they decide. The other thing about Rassie Erasmus is he spoke about the bomb squad and the makeup of the bomb squad. Now, the big surprise about the bomb squad was the lack thereof a lock on the bench and no sort of natural replacement for Eamon Etzebeth and Arceus Neyman. By the way, Arceus Neyman is carrying a niggle as well and is being monitored during the week. And because if he doesn't make it, then Bruno Nokia will come into the side. So not guaranteed that Arceus Neyman will in fact play on Saturday, because apparently he is nursing a bit of a niggle. And I think they would. I don't think they'll. For example, put a Ben J. Dixon at 5. They'll bring in Bruno Nokia straight swap for Arceus Neyman, a genuine number 5, good line operator, take charge of the line out. So I think that's kind of probably the way they'll go with regards to that Arceus Neyman injury. But in terms of the bomb squad, it's going to come a full circle with Pieter-Steph du Toit set to cover lock. Is where he started in his career, did Pieter-Steph du Toit, back when he was playing for the Sharks. And whilst he can cover lock, Ben Jason Dixon is very much seen as a blindside flank by the Springbok staff, and says that he thinks he can learn from Pieter-Steph du Toit in terms of being able to play for 5 and 7, but Pieter-Steph du Toit is able to cover that. So he said as follows: in this match, I think the way to go is either the two locks must go the full 80 minutes or Pieter-Steph must move to lock. He says, we have been trying Ben Jason Dixon at lock in training, but we are careful not to play him out of position, but almost perform like Pieter-Steph did in the past. A lot of people say that Pieter-Steph should only play lock, which we all thought was his best position in the beginning, but then he became one of the best 7s in the world. So we think Ben Jason can learn a lot from Pieter-Steph and the way he can alternate between 7 and 5. So this is what I said the other day, and somebody came back, had a go and said, Ben just doesn't, it's not a lock, he doesn't play lock. How can you say he covers lock? Because he does cover lock. They are trying him at lock. If there are injuries, for example, then he can play lock this weekend. He has played lock at the Stormers. Not a lot, but it's not. It wouldn't be the first time ever in his career he's had to sort of jump into the second row. I think he's such an talented player. I think he probably could alternate. To be perfectly honest, he's got a tremendous work rate. He's a decent line operator as well, and line option. But if we look back at his career, for example, he has played 6 times at lock. Yes, it's only 24, which is 25%, by the way, of his career so far for the Stormers. So if you go look at last season, for example, he started at number 4, 3 games in a row, as well as another game against Ulster because of injuries down there at Stormers. But and previously before that, he was coming off the bench covering the flag, but he also came off the bench, in fact, against the Lions, covering lock. So it's not completely alien to him. But it is interesting that we're going to see Pieter-Steph du Toit move back to lock, a position he hasn't played in for many, many years. Obviously, with the experience he has, would be very competent playing that. It is where he sort of came through the system playing. What will be interesting, for example, is to see where, if he sort of maybe makes that move sort of permanently. A lot of people have suggested that maybe sort of as he's getting on in years, Pieter-Steph du Toit towards the latter stage of his career, sort of the twilight era of his career, will he maybe look to make that move to lock almost sort of permanently? Because I mean, in theory, you don't have to be as mobile to be a lock. Again, I think you look at Pieter-Steph du Toit and the way he played the World Cup final last year, a couple of the games in Ireland, he still looks like he's at the top of his game. So not slowing down anytime soon, but it would be an interesting situation in 2-3 years' time if he is sort of struggling maybe to get around the park as he once was. I mean, Rusty basically said he can cover wingy so quick. But it would be a very simple switch for him to move back into the second row, where he can afford to be slightly slower, slightly sort of, and get back to more sort of the hard graft and sort of more sort of Frank and Mostert role, compared to what Pieter-Steph du Toit currently fulfills. So that's going to be an interesting part of it. I'm very surprised not to see Sal Murat on the bench, for example. He's a player who played consistently throughout that Ireland series. He's played most of the games for in the. I think he's actually played all the games. For I think him and Sash Palmer-Gomez are the only 2 players who played all 4 games so far, but doesn't play this weekend. So it's interesting that, for example, he hasn't been picked where he has previously very much been backed by the coaching staff. So yeah, it's an interesting selection. I do think that the 6-2 split does work better when you've got second rows coming on. They tend to be a bit bigger, a bit more physical, and sort of bring that sort of that physical impact. So I do think that it is a slightly weaker bomb squad in inverted commas by virtue of not having that sort of second row on the bench. But I suppose it's nice to sort of rotate. But let's talk a little bit about the number 10, shall we? And what is next for MANIE LIBBOK and amongst the Rise /Famigoma Zulu. You've got Andre Pollard still on the mix. You've got a Jordan Hendricks who they do rate. Who could be part of the squads coming up, because it's a very interesting thing. And the polls, for example, just sort of demonstrating how interesting of a conversation it is. MANIE LIBBOK is a player who's had some absolute mental highs and some lows in a Springbok jersey. He's had man of the match performances in World Cup on his full World Cup debut, starting for the Boks against Scotland, got man of the match, was absolutely sublime in what was arguably one of our best performances of the World Cup. He's also had struggles with the kicking team. We know that. Struggled against Portugal and off the tee. And we've now seen a Sash Van come through where he's kicked for goal beautifully. He hasn't missed a beat. I think he might have missed 1 or 2 throughout the last few matches. So it's a very interesting scenario where you've got a player like MANIE LIBBOK who, from an attacking point of view, is the best fly half we have in this country. I've got no issue saying that he is. Even ahead of a Sash Famigoma, for example. Nobody controls and gets a backline going and creates space like MANIE LIBBOK does. That we've seen over the past few years. And he's just unfortunate in that he plays in a team where there are no other goal kickers around the park. If he played for France and you had Thomas Ramos at 15, he'd be absolutely invincible. If he played for New Zealand, you could have Geordie Barrett, for example, kicking for goal, or Danny McKenzie at full back kicking for goal. He'd be absolutely fine. He's almost disadvantage in the fact that he plays for the Springboks, who don't have a person in Montgomery, for example, like we did back in the day. And it's an interesting one because some people are sitting there saying, well, it's part of a skill set. He doesn't have it, therefore he shouldn't play. And I understand that concept, because you don't. I mean, how do you fit him in? You need a goal kicker on the day that that. You've got one of the best center combinations in the world, so you're not going to suddenly start playing 100 Pollard at 12 or Safam Gomezulu at 12 purely because you need their goal kicking ahead of a Damien Willemse. Are you not going to drop a Damien Willemse from 15 to play Safam Gomezulu at 15 just so you've got a goal kicker? You don't want to be in that scenario. But at the same time, you've got a fly half who creates tries and creates. I mean, that's what Jacques Nielba said. MANIE keep pulling against Scotland had got 2 try assists. Similarly against France as well. Doesn't have his best day off the tee, but creative tries. And they asked him, are you concerned about the goal kicking? And he said, not if he wins man of the match. He says if he is creating tries, then that's more valuable to the team. If he's getting 2 try assists, that means he's created 10 points, which is equivalent to 3 penalties. Well, more than 3 penalties actually. And if he nails, both of those conversions, for example, he's been directly responsible for 14 points, which would take more than 4 penalties to equal. So it's a bit of a catch-22 situation. Knockout rugby, for example, closely fought test matches are largely often decided by the boot. We saw Marcus Smith have this issue in the first test against the All Blacks, where if he had had a better day off the tee, England would have won. But again, you then look at some of these games, and if certain players don't play, and they, can they pull off that cross kick, that cut-out pass, for example? Can they create a couple of space? Can they take a line like MANIE does? Create that space, create a 2-on-1, put players into the corner and create try-scoring opportunities. We haven't scored that many tries this year. Take away Portugal. We haven't scored. I mean, for example, we were kept out against Ireland in the second test. We scored all of our tries coming from, and all our points coming from the boot. And that's, for example, where you sit there thinking, well, we lost the game, but because we were so dominant, we had a decent goal kicker in the likes of Andre Pollard, we got back into the game. But you then wonder, well, MANIE plays, does he unlock that defense? Does he find a way through in a way that Andre Pollard can't, in a way that Safam Gomezulu can't as well? Sasha is a phenomenal talent. We know this. He is very inexperienced. He's got the pedigree, as far as I'm concerned. I think everybody kind of agrees with that. And I think he is far more attacking natured than Andre Pollard. I mean, he's got everything. He's got a great kicking game. He kicks for goal beautifully. He is an attacking, a natured flower half. This is Sasha Gomezulu. Wants to take the ball to the line, for example. Has got great awareness, very good defensively. So he is the complete package. What I'm saying is I don't think we should be throwing away MANIE. I think that he still has so much to offer. Either playing, for example, even just being in the setup. I think that, and when I asked Sasha Gomezulu at the URC launch a couple of years ago, I said to him, playing 10, playing 12, what's the chat? And he said, what he'd really like to do is be able to play with MANIE as well as Damien Willemse in the same team. He said, those are 2 players he really wants to learn from. And you can definitely do a lot worse than learning from an attacking point of view and from a game management point of view than a MANIE, who is a proper general, controls the game very well. His infield sort of open play kicking is really, really good. His kicking with touch, very, very good. So he's got everything bar the goal kicking, and I think there is so much to learn from him. So I think having him in the setup, having him in and around a Safam Gomezulu is incredibly valuable. And if in that regard, I really hope that he continues to play a big part. Let's look at the comments. And CJ says, what happens if Saru push pressure Stormers to play Sasha at 10 in the name of national development? What do I want to do? They can't. At the end of the day, they can tell the sort of unions, we'd like to maybe see this, but the unions are under no obligation to do that. John Dobson is under no obligation to play Sasha at 10 if they believe it's better to have MANIE at 10. That's just that you can't sit there and start dictating to franchise where to play players, because John Dobson might sit there and say, listen, I've got to try and get MANIE, Safam Gomezulu, Damien Willemse, Warwick Land all into a team. I think the best way to do it is to play MANIE at 10, Sasha at 12, Damien at 15 or Damien at 12, Sasha at 15, Warwick maybe on the wing, for example. He's got to try and find his best team, and you can't dictate that to him. So it's going to be an interesting season coming up ahead for John Dobson in terms of how he gets this right, because you've also got somebody like a Dan du Plessis, who's a phenomenal talent. John Dobson has spoken about the idea of Warwick at 13 before. He's never really done it, but he's spoken about it. Does he maybe look at that kind of option? Does he look at see if Damian Willemse can play at 13? So it's an interesting scenario in terms of how does he try and get all those sort of fit those pieces of the puzzle. I mean, Stormers are incredibly lucky to have so much talent in that backline. That's not even talking about your Angelo Davids, your want to see some lines they've just signed. Players coming through as well. They've got a lot of good youngsters coming through. So it's a nice position for John Dobson to be in. Michael saying, wonder if MANIE might ever play some at 15, Sasha 10, Damien 12, MANIE 15, at least at the Stormers. Look, he has played at 15 before, but he's a much better 10. So I think in that situation, if you're going to play Sasha, Damien, and MANIE in a team, for me, MANIE has to be a fly half. That for me just makes the most sense. You then probably have Sasha 12, Damien 15. I do think Damien is the Stormers' best 12. I personally think he could be I think, for me, he's the one that can really contend with Damien De Allende and Andre Esterhuizen at 12. I think Damien Willemse's best position is at 12, to be perfectly honest. I know he's phenomenal at 15, but I just think that when he's at 12, he gets so much more opportunity with ball in hand and is so exciting there. So you could go MANIE, Damien, Sasha. You could go MANIE, Sasha, Damien. It's pretty much for muchness. But you definitely can get those three players. If Dan du Plessis can do a job at outside centre, become a 13, a genuine 13, then I think that solves also a whole lot of problems. Because I think that Dan du Plessis is incredibly talented and could be a Springbok as well. Ultimate Sharpshooter says, the MANIE remains an attacking genius. He will always be selected in the Springbok setup. Reason the selection is not forced is because Willie is there. Take Willie out and the selection becomes complicated. That is a very good point. We've seen this, for example, and we saw it during the World Cup. We need to have a playmaker. We need to have somebody who creates opportunities. That playmaker for the last 5-6 years has been Willie Leroux. When Andre Pollard has played, we've needed Willie Leroux, who often comes in as first receiver. He identifies the space. He creates the tries. He's got some of the most assists in the world rugby in the last decade. When he's not playing, but MANIE LIBBOK is playing, again, we've got that playmaker, Now, we're hoping that Sash Zulu is kind of going to be both, but MANIE LIBBOK, for example, allowed the Damien Willemse selection, who's a phenomenal 15 in his own right. Very different type of player to Willie Leroux in terms of his link-up play, the way you could slot in the first receiver, you can be the playmaker. David Williams is far more, he prefers ball in hand himself, for example. He loves to put it to the boot and, those trademark sort of grabbers in behind. Defensively, obviously a bit quicker around the field than Willie Leroux is these days. Not that Willie Leroux is slow by any means, but a very different type of player. Ultimate Sharpshooter then, so I do have that MANIE does get the next game against Australia and potentially involved for the EP test against New Zealand. Perhaps start saying it's not really a shitty headline. It's a question mark because it's a response to what people are saying. And yesterday's literal headline was the Sash Zulu era begins. So yeah, if you come in yesterday, you could have watched an entire half-an-hour show about how much we're excited that Sash Zulu would play. It does have ramifications, Albert Lowe starting at 8 while everyone was recovered for 6 months. You're lying to yourself if you don't think this could be a very, very important time for an Albert Lowe, and unfortunately, it could be a very difficult time for Evan Lewis, who can no longer stake his claim in the next 6 months and therefore allow somebody else to come through and grab the opportunity. Jesse Creel 3 years ago would not have been starting this test. But because of the injury to Lekanya, because of the phenomenal season he had, he now has the number 13 jersey, and Lekanya is going to have to try and take it from him. But as long as Jesse Creel he's putting up man of the match type performances, he's going to continue wearing the number 13. So Sash Zulu coming through is incredibly exciting. And if he keeps playing well, he's going to keep that 10 jersey. If Andre Pollard comes off the bench well, he's going to keep that jersey as well. Then MANIE LIBBOK falls to the wayside. So what happens with him? And where does he slot in? CJ says you have to play your best players in the best positions. If Sash continues on this current trajectory, he has to play fly half. Ultra Sharpshooter saying, agree that Manie's presence in the setup just helps Sasha more. Worst thing for Sasha is to assume he is the finished product. If Sasha can master Manie's tack, he is easily the best flower in the world. Leslie saying, Manie is good enough for the Springboks bars kicking. If he has half a brain, he'll go to soccer coach and get his kicking problem resolved. Anything else is pure knucklehead stuff. I can tell you for a fact, Manie LIBBOK spends an incredible amount of time on his goal kicking. If you watch him, he's never, he doesn't strike the ball badly. I always use David Williams as the example, who can kick for goal, but for me, doesn't look like a natural goal kicker. Manie LIBBOK is such a frustrating one because he's done it in the big pressure situations. The whole idea that he can't play in a pressure game is nonsense. He created 2 tries against France. He's won the URC with the Stormers. He knocked La Rochelle out with that in the Champions Cup with that last minute conversion right up against the touchline. He had a similar one which he missed the next season, but he's gotten the Stormers to 2 URC finals, for example. He's played in the World Cup. He has played in some of the most high pressure games you could play in and done well in them. So, for example, the idea that he's not built for the big games is nonsense because he's done it. He has done it. He played really well against Ireland. In terms of the way he controlled the game. Again, if for example you had Sasham Gomezulu starting at 15 this weekend and Manie LIBBOK at 10, I would sit there saying that the problem solved. I think that could have been a very interesting selection. I think Manie LIBBOK will get this back line going better than Sasham Gomezulu will right now. He is just a better player with regards to attacking nature. I think Manie LIBBOK has only lost 2 or 3 times with the Springboks where he's actually started. He came off the bench against... let's have a look over here. His first game ever was the Autumn Nations Cup. He came off the bench against France and played all of... I don't want to lie to you. He played all of 5 minutes and he lost that game. He then came off, played 34 minutes against Italy, where he got 5 points, including that incredible try assist. He then played 20 minutes against England and won. We then go look at the Rugby Championship last year, where he won against Australia, starting, played a full 80 minutes. Lost against New Zealand, came off the bench. David Williams started that game, played 18 minutes, and then started against Argentina, which we won. And then we go look at last year, for example, and started against Argentina, and we won. Started against Wales, which we won. Started against New Zealand, which we won. Started against Scotland, which we won. Started against Ireland, which we lost. So basically, as a starter, Manie LIBBOK has lost 1 game for the Springboks. 1. That's a pretty interesting stat, if you ask me. The only time he's ever lost as a starter player was against Ireland in the World Cup last year. So for some people sit there saying it's not international quality. It's not a bad win rate, is it? If you look at his games, he's played in total. He has played 15 matches for the Springboks. He started 67 of them. He has won 12, lost 3. One of those he's on for 5 minutes. So he's essentially won 12 out of 14 games he's actually really played for the Springboks. He averages about 6 points a game. Scored a try. Would love to see a sort of the try assists as he started, but he's got an incredibly good win rate with the Boks. And we do play better. Rusty Russ was even said last year in Joey Chase of the Sun, we're a better side when he plays. We are. Trevor says, if you have Manie at 10, Willems at 12, Sash at 15, then you can have Pollard on the bench for weight and tight games. Agree. Says, I know the talk about his flower house, but what's up with our outside centres? Both in their early 30s, no real backup yet. Marcus saying, if we still had Alton or Lambie, all the discussion would be so different. It is a fun thought, isn't it? In terms of, if we did have those 2 players, how different would the conversations be, for example? Alton Yankees has thrown his career away in the last 2 years, but he's always a player who was never really given his flowers. I think the 4th or 5th, highest point scorer for the Boks, played 49 tests for the Boks. So for all the people he used to receive a lot of hate, had some really good moments. And Pat Lambie, for example, if he was still playing, would we have seen the rise of 100 par the way that we did see? Would we have seen more competition, for example? In terms of the outside centre, you know, look, Jesse Creel and Nakanya are very much still in the mix for a while. They both make the next World Cup. Jesse Creel is 30 years old, just turned 30. Probably has the body fat index of about 0.02. Nakanya is 30 at the moment, turns 31 at the end of the year. So they're not old. They'll be around for the next World Cup in theory. At least one of them will be. In terms of the next generation of outside centres, interesting to see where Slayman Hartzenberg settles. Interesting to see what happens to Caden Moody. Caden Moody obviously played at outside centre for the Boks. He's listed as a centre in the Boks setup as well. The big one that they really rate is Henkel van Wyk, who's got lots of injuries. He posted on Instagram yesterday actually with a picture of his boots, and he seems to be on a field. So I don't know if that means he's back and running or that's an old photo. That's just a promo photo. But he's very much on the radar. And then you've also got a player like mentioned, David Creel, 25 years old. You know, want to see the Similani can get playing again. He's an option as well. So there are some options for 13. I agree it is a position we probably need to start looking at with a decent amount of seriousness. Similarly at 12, for example. But again, you've got a Sashwan Gamazulu who can play at 12. Daniel Williamson can go and play at 12. Andre Estes is not old at all. I don't even know if Andre Estes is hit 30. I want to say he's 29 years old. He's 30, turned 30 this year. So he's not particularly old, and then you've got players like Dan du Plessis coming through, who's very talented. You've got quite a lot of options. Just saying, big difference between New Zealand, Ireland, and the other teams. TG Chambers say, knowing that the mix of youth and experience is so important, how can all the 30-year-old players we have make the next World Cup? Well, they can. If you're 30 years old, you're going to be 33 at the next World Cup. That's not old, you know. So it's an interesting situation where this now in the next year we have to start seeing which players are going to make it, for example, you know, which players might not make it. And these are the kind of decisions we have to start making now in the next couple of years with regards to players which need to be back, players where we need to sort of add depth positions. But this is the thing, and this is where I trust our coaching staff. Because I think we will see players being brought in. So, for example, Dwayne Vermeulen has retired, and we've already seen, you know, 3 different number 8 starting this year before Jasper Wiese. So that's 4 options we've got at 8 all of a sudden already. You know, so I think that this coach staff is very aware. They've got the tradition, they've got the roadmaps of players on the system and who might sort of come through. So, you know, it's a balancing act at the end of the day to try and get things right. But we are only 1 year after the World Cup, you know, and I don't think I've got a really big problem with the players, with the fans who want to bin a lot of these players because they're 30 years old. And at 30 plus, you know, a lot of these, I mean, Dwayne Vermeulen, look at Deon Fourie, the oldest Springbok ever. And he was absolutely terrific in that World Cup final. So, you know, age really is just a number at the moment. You know, some players can play until they're 40, you know, and are playing. I mean, Augustin Creevey's still playing, by the way. Augustin Creevey is going to play against the Springboks once again. You know, he's 39 years old, turns 40 next year, and he's still going to play. He's you know, he's been playing for Argentina since 2005. He's been playing for 19 years. And he's still going. So, you know, I think that we need to move away from, especially, you know, sports science and the likes, we need to move away from just looking at number of age next to them and look at just performance. You know, if they're performing at the highest level and they're still looking like they've got it, we don't need to move on from them yet. Until players' performance start dropping, you know, back them, as far as I'm concerned. But we're going to wrap up there, people. We'll be live once again tomorrow for our final news show of the week. We'll have an Australian team to discuss, as well as potentially a New Zealand and Argentina team as well. Obviously, they're also getting their campaigns underway this weekend, so we'll discuss all that tomorrow. Please do smash the like on the video. Please do subscribe to the channel as well. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Steve.